Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Peter Spata, who's Project Management Officer at Universal Logistics. And he's participating in our latest installment of Profiles in Yard Management Excellence, where we highlight companies that are leading the way in driving continuous improvement and innovation in yard management. So it's great to welcome Peter to the program. So Peter, great to have you on here.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity, Adrian. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss our projects and a little about our company as well.
Great. Well, let's start there. Before we dive into the topic, why don't you tell us briefly a little bit about Universal Logistics and your current role and responsibilities there at the company?
Well, Universal Logistics Holding is actually the company, the entity, the holding company for a family of publicly traded transportation and value-added management business entities. So we have truckload services, we have brokerage operations, we have dedicated truckload and route management, intermodal, expedite, all on the truckload side. And the value-added side, we have warehouse management, where we actually we'll go in and manage an entire warehouse operation for a company if they prefer, or manage it in our own building with our own staff. Whatever options the customer needs, we've been able to fulfill over the many years. We'll perform warehousing. We also do kitting, sub-assembly, cross-dock operations. We also have an international and domestic freight forwarding operation. In fact, that's where I began my career here. In the sub-assembly, we actually we had launched, this is back, I believe, in 2008, an operation in Mexico where we launched from a greenfield property and are managing and assembling front horizontal, front vertical, rear axles, tire and wheel assemblies, all within the same facility. And that's been going on now for, I guess that gives us about 8-9 years. It was an interesting project for us, and I was pleased to be part of that group to help launch the project there. We participate in aerospace, automotive, industrial, engineering, energy, and retail. These are all part of the customer base that we're currently operating with.
Great. Very, very diverse company. Obviously, a lot of different industries that you serve and a lot of different operations. And in your main role there, Peter, at the company?
Well, at present, my title is Project Management Officer. As I mentioned, I had started out, actually, Adrian, I started out here, it'll be 31 years next month.
Wow, congratulations. That's a great tenure.
I had a little more hair then, and it was brown then as well. As you can well appreciate, I see.
Yes, absolutely. Well, great intro to the company there and provide some perspective. So to get started, I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about yard management at Universal, but particularly before you implemented your current solution. I mean, what business challenges or continuous improvement opportunities kind of led you to seek a solution?
Well, we operate one of I'd say the country's largest, if not one of the largest in the world, cross-dock operation, pure cross-dock operations in Romulus, Michigan. And at that time, the facility had still has 350 dock doors, and at that time about 550 yard spaces. It has since increased to, I think, about 800 or 850 yard spaces. So you can well imagine that size property, that many dock doors to manage, and the high velocity of trailers going in and out of this property every day, that it would be a nightmare without some form of automation to help manage it, which was our condition back in well, I think it was 2009, 2010 when we launched our first yard management site. And at that time, you can figure, you're working with two-way radios with the truck drivers. You may end up having to go out and say, hey, meet me over at door 17. I'm going to give you the list of your next batch of moves. And with a property that size, I believe at that time we had 10 yard truck drivers that could be on any given shift. And so we obviously had the challenge of finding trailers in such a large property, quickly finding them, being able to designate spaces or particular zones in the yard for the trailers to be located, and for the drivers to easily find them. We also would have the yard auditor that would have to go out manually with a spreadsheet and go through and check off trailers where they should be, and confirmation of what was on them, loaded, unloaded, containers, whatever the status may be of that trailer. And obviously the customer communications, customers wanting to know the status of the trailer. Did this carrier make it in yet? Did you get this into the dock door yet? Has it been unloaded? And we also have another function that's common across a few of our sites where we needed to have visibility into how many empty trailers would be there for a particular company, a particular carrier or SCAC code. And certain carriers would need a specific quantity of trailers in that batch and had to maintain that, and we had to be able to support that. So those were the key challenges in such a high velocity property.
Yeah, I think what you described there is something I hear a lot from other companies, but obviously the scale and scope of your operations further exacerbate the challenges there. So to achieve, obviously you had some objectives to try to improve and resolve some of those challenges. I mean, to achieve those objectives, I mean, what were some of the key capabilities you were looking for in a yard management solution?
Well, and part of our list, of course, one of the high points on the list was to get costs down, try and reduce the number of drivers we would need to maintain the yard properly. We needed efficiency in the yard. We needed to be able to minimize the amount of time we'd have to have somebody performing a physical yard audit. That was a full-time job. And demurrage cost, where you have a ocean container sitting on the property that is sitting for too long, and we're going to incur charges for it sitting for X number of days. So we need to get that cost down. Communication with the carriers, communication with our customers, and again, all of these would ultimately affect the cost. So those were the key objectives, and that led us into at that time I was had come on board with our logistics group. As I mentioned previously, I was with our operations on the international and domestic freight forwarding side, and came over to logistics, and I was responsible for the IT group. So I was approached by our CEO at the time and said, okay, I think it's time. And we had been talking about it for years, and with the managers, directors of the operations down there. So I said, okay, excuse me, let's do the research, come back to me with numbers and options, and we'll take it from there. So that started our search.
Great. No, great series of, great objectives there. So tell us a little bit about the evaluation process then. I mean, who was involved? What kind of things were you looking for in the solutions, and ultimately, what factors led you to, you ultimately selected Pink as your technology partner. What factors led you to select Pink?
Well, it was an interesting project to launch, and it was very important that we got a team together. There was representative of the operations there. So the director of the facility, some of the key supervisors on the staff and the dock staff, key office staff, clerks, and of course the yard truck drivers. So it felt it was very important to get a good representative of the yard truck who could also help us take ownership and get the critical buy-in that you need from all the parties. They were the ones ultimately who were going to be in the middle of all of this and would also benefit from it. So really playing on the benefits of it, getting their input, which was important and oftentimes gets overlooked, and also the guards. So we started I started the research on it by just going through and finding all of the potential yard management vendors. And at that time, I really didn't know much about the requirements for yard management, the kind of hardware, the software that was out there. So I went through, made the list, started calling up the vendors, and we had about 7 of them to start with. And as we got a little experience in talking with them, started to get a better understanding of what we needed, what would be helpful to us, and what would be helpful for all fronts, not just the yard truck drivers and efficiencies, but also something we could work with long term. So some of the key things we found about up front, and I wasn't focusing on this in the beginning, was RFID tags versus non-RFID tags. We just went out and said, okay, let's see what different types of technology are out there and how they use them. So as we dug into it, we got an understanding of what the real key differences for us would need to be. And we narrowed it down to using RFID in some form. Some of the other options for scanning or barcodes and all of this, they weren't comprehensive enough and wouldn't serve our purpose well in that large operation. So the quick feature that we had to focus on, the quick solution for us was RFID, and then the second layer of that is what type. So for those who aren't familiar with it, the primary features between the two for RFID tagging is an active tag versus a passive tag. And in our case, the active tags weren't that important for us. An active tag is one that has a battery built in, so it's constantly broadcasting, as opposed to the passive tag that just receives a message that says, hey, I'm here, after we ping it. And they get a RFID reader that passes by and essentially energizes it and says, I'm here, as opposed to the active tags that are constantly broadcasting, saying, I'm out here, and here's my ID, telling what the tag is and the information that's related to that, which gets associated with it when it comes in the yard. So in the nature of show and tell, here's an example. So this is an example of the permanent tag that could go on a trailer. It's a little thinner, and it doesn't have the magnet that the temporary tags would have. Normally there's a magnet on the back side of these as well, and this just gets mounted on the steel frame, wherever you can find a steel frame, and would typically do in a very specific spot on the container. So we narrowed it down to the passive tags in our case. The active tags are very important for trailers that get nested and they're further away from each other, or further away from the source of the yard trucks as they pass by. And it's far more useful in like a container, ocean container yard where the containers are stacked and nested. For our case, that wasn't important to us, and the passive tags were far less expensive, and so that helped us narrow it down, the providers, even another level. So we were left with 2 or 3 providers after all of that, and then reviewing the capabilities, whether it's a hosted by the provider or that we host it at our own server in our own server room, the licensing model differences, the capability of having what they call a portal where the yard truck can come in and just pass right by specific readers that are designed for these particular permanent tags. So that helped us narrow it down to really 2 providers. And at that point, it was a cost, reporting capabilities, the maturity of the application, the implementation timeline, and some of the other key features led us to pick Pink Solutions.
Great. So it sounds like, obviously it sounds like you did a lot of homework, up front, in terms of understanding, the scope of the market, if you will. I love the fact that you involved all the key stakeholders that were going to be involved ultimately in getting this successfully implemented. Obviously, because like we all know that you need to get the buy-in and the input from all those folks to make it successful. So I love that you did all that, and obviously you went through a very thorough evaluation there. So how did you go about implementing the solution? I mean, who was involved in it actually then after you made that selection in implementing it, and how long did it take? Things like that.
So the final decision was ultimately made by the whole group, and to our advantage, everybody was agreeing on the same product. We saw the key benefits for all the individual roles that we had to satisfy, and to help with efficiencies. And so all of those participants also then became leads for us when it came time for training and rolling out the project. So once we had settled on the product, we also then, and once we provided a purchase order to Pink Solutions, it was about a 1 month timeline to get the hardware in, get it installed in the yard trucks, and then it was a 2-week time period that we allocated for training. So all of the participants that were in the original selection also became key players for us when it came time to do the training. Pink Solutions came in with their team, and they had, we designated our, slots of hours wherever we could get them for all of the specific types of users, which is a little difficult to do in an active operation. Fortunately, at that time, if I recall correctly, we were coming up on a holiday weekend. I think it was July 4th, if I remember correctly, 2010. And some of our key customer at that property was actually going to be shut down. So we geared the training around that time. So the activity level in the yard was much less, and we could spend a little more time and dedicate more time and for each one of the user types. So we had to have blocks of hours set aside for the guards, the guard service. They have their own module or piece of this. The yard truck drivers have their own. It's really stripped down for them to be able to just perform and do exactly what they need to do with very little other peripheral, things you might find in software. It's stripped down and geared just for the driver to be able to focus on that, not to have to get too involved in software nonsense. Then the supervisors on the dock and administrative staff in the offices had their own group, and then there was a separate training for the administrators of the application. And there were only a couple required for that. So once all the users were registered in the system, we started the training, and as I noted, spent about 2 weeks of dedicated time, and in between there we're working with the yard truck drivers, working out any little kinks that you'll normally come across in any large project, and give them all an opportunity for their input and tweak it as we go along, because there's a lot of setup and configuration in the application itself. And as they got to understand more how the application could work for us, there were tweaks and changes that would get made along the way to try and fine tune it. And it was good. It was a good exercise, and they all played key roles in trying to make it an efficient product for us.
Great, great. It sounds like, from what you described there, that, the solution was really, the different modules were tailored to the different, users within the overall operation. And you had the opportunity, during this quote unquote slower time, to really tailor the training for each of the different stakeholders in the operation. That helped out a lot in terms of, getting the feedback that you needed, getting them trained, and then obviously, working on any kinks or opportunities for improvement as you then started gearing up, more broadly across the operation there. So what have been some of the benefits, to date, with the solution, and any unexpected benefits?
Sure. And well, a key benefit as we started out the project and noted we needed to find a way to reduce costs and become more efficient. Right up front, we figured we saved about $130,000 a year. We were able to reduce our yard truck drivers by 2. And that happened very naturally. Nobody actually lost their job. It happened with attrition. And we were able to scale back on the yard truck drivers, the quantity of trucks that needed to support the yard, the amount of fuel that had to be spent, maintaining those also. It helped us to automate the carrier pool, as I mentioned before, where we could see exactly how many trailers had made it into the yard and how many are there for each specific SCAT code that we needed to maintain. So the net savings we figured to be about $130,000 a year. As far as the unexpected benefits, one of the keys was really the customer confidence that was gained. Now, this was the first site that we rolled out. Since then, we've rolled out 5 other sites, and we're going to expand on one of those here also in the near future, where it becomes more of a campus project instead of just a single site. But the customer confidence was important for us. They felt we had a more reliable product to provide them with, could give them better information, quicker feedback, more reliability, certainly reduced the amount of time that we spent with communication with them and having to get back to them later when we finally figured out the answer. And the historical tracking. There was a couple of incidents, for example, and in fact, one of them was within maybe 2 months of us launching the project, where there was one of the trailers, actually somebody had kind of knocked down part of our fence with one of the trailers backing into it. And curiously, we're able to go back through Pink's system. It can actually do a historical breadcrumb trail. You can look at a live switcher display, essentially, and see all the live activity going on. Follow a trailer from this door. It actually tracks it through the yard with a little breadcrumb. Well, you can go back and pull those back up historically and see which trailer was moved by which driver at what time. And not only that, how fast they were going. So there are 2 incidents that were important to us that this had the unexpected benefit of. One is finding out which driver it was that backed into the fence and knocked it over. And the other was somebody who had tipped a trailer over in the yard. And we were able to go in and confirm how fast that driver was going around the curve in that particular instance, and confirm that he was going too fast, because it actually, with all of with the satellite tracking, it also is able to provide us with the speed, and found out the driver was in fact going too fast. So
interesting. Yeah, those are two great examples there of the power of having that kind of information, both real time as well as historical, to be able to go back and see some of those types of events. So now, moving forward, I mean, what's next for Universal in terms of, continuously improving your yard management operations, and how can technology help?
Yeah, that's a good question, Adrian, because we've got another project that we rolled out in at one site, and this one's in Smyrna, Tennessee, and we intend to expand that. And part of the expansion is going to be integrating it with our warehouse management system we call AccuLink, which will provide us with also easier integration with our customers' data coming in the door. We've got Pink allows us to receive an ASN. We can also upload any number of file types into the system to be able to match up with arrival times, for example, into a yard. We can create lane integrations, dedicated routes. You can do rules-based events. So if we've got a trailer coming in the yard, we already know what trailer is supposed to be coming in by the ASN. And within that ASN, there also may be a customer reference number that's critical to them. We're managing not only the yard at this particular facility, but we're managing the entire 750,000 square foot warehouse. So it's important for them, and it's also a pretty high velocity operation, feeding automotive assembly. So what we'll be able to do is tie in with our AccuLink WMS and also provide electronic feedback to our customer with arrival times and, again, rules-based events. You can direct that trailer to a specific door once it comes in the yard for a particular route that has to run. It may be loaded with specific parts that go to one specific door over at the plant that we're feeding, or park the trailer in a specific zone out in the yard for it to be picked up by another driver later. But the key will be also, again, integrating with the warehouse management, which will then direct some automated events, statuses. That'll be a big help for us. We have a transportation management system that we use and other locations where there are dedicated truck routes. And at this point, there hasn't been a need for it, but there will be in the future. We're going to be providing some updates to our transportation management. Actually, our software development group is already rolling out an application. We call it Move It. It's a handheld driver application that'll communicate back to all of our different transportation systems. All of that's going to feed into business intelligence, data analytics application that we're managing. So it gives all kinds of reporting capabilities back to our administrative staff, to finance. It's a big project that's going on in the background of all of this. And ultimately, any information we can get from the transportation management system, warehouse management system tied into this is a big benefit to us down the road.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like obviously you've made great improvements to date, but the job is never done. As I think, as you've exemplified there, there's always more and more opportunities for continuous improvement and to continue to drive value in the operation. So great roadmap there that you have. So Peter, as a way to wrap up, I mean, what words of advice or recommendations would you give to other companies that are just getting started on their journey of evaluating, selecting, and implementing a yard management solution?
Well, as mentioned earlier, the team is very important. It's critical. Get the right people up front. Give them ownership of the project. They'll provide you feedback in ways that you would never expect. It's a happy, unexpected benefit. And that means even from the finance side, from management, IT was very important in this. Another reason for the importance of the IT in this was at the time we also had, our staff was pretty well maxed out on the IT end of this. And to add another application into the mix that was required for 24-hour nonstop, no downtime support wasn't in the cards at the time. Now we were better suited to be able to support that type of operation. But the benefit at that time was being able to have it hosted by Pinkett and us not having to have 24-hour monitoring of it from the server side. The other important thing that people here are probably tired of me harping on it. Whenever we launch a new yard management system, I insist that they dedicate a yard sheriff. Ultimately, it's pointless to have a good application working for you if you don't manage it and you don't measure with it. So having somebody who's in the initial stages, it required a lot more time, and that's why it was important to get somebody assigned up front and in fact budget for it. In our case, the yard management systems, we try and get an understanding up front when we're going through an RFQ. We have hundreds of RFQs that we go through every year that we participate in with customers. And what we've understood is if we approach the customer up front in the beginning of the project and they get an understanding of the benefits of yard management, we can then include it in the budget. It then doesn't become a capital outlay for us that we're just eating to try and gain efficiencies. It's a benefit to both us and the customer. So it's important for us to consider that as we're budgeting for projects and turning in quotes for RFQs. So including that yard management sheriff in the budget is helpful as well, and making sure that operationally we use that person efficiently. Because it'll require a few hours a day in the beginning, and thereafter it's maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day per shift, keeping an eye on it, following up on issues. We end up with problems with our temporary tags not being placed on the trailers or not getting pulled off the trailers when they go out the gate. So we also then don't get the status updates in the system because of that. So the yard sheriff's responsibility is to go back through and work with all of the different entities to make sure that they're providing proper status updates. That goes for the folks on the dock that are checking trailers out, closing them out, closing out the status, changing the status in the system, making sure it's being done in a timely manner, and also working with yard truck drivers. The benefit they have is now they can go out in the yard, they'll get a dispatch, somebody will, from the office, will enter in the required move, shows up in the list for each individual driver or as a log for all of the drivers to look at and pick them off one by one in their order of priority. And then the yard system tells them where it is. So if they aren't also doing their status updates saying, okay, I've completed this move, then we have orphan trailers, in the yard, or an orphan trailer in the dock, something that got moved and wasn't completed in the system as well. So that was important for the yard sheriff.
Yeah, I love that concept of a yard sheriff. I hadn't heard about that. And do they have to wear a cowboy hat and a badge? I think, is that part of the attire?
Yeah, the badge and the pointy boots.
That's great. That's great. Well, Peter, some great recommendations and words of advice there. And again, I want to thank you for making the time to participate in today's edition of Profiles in Yard Management Excellence and sharing your story and the success that Universal Logistics has had. So thank you for making the time. That's
great. I appreciate it, Adrian. Thanks for letting us present some of our company features and functions as well.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Pink website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question for Peter, you can post it there. I'm sure that he will be more than happy to respond via that medium.
Sure.
Again, thank you all for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.
Thanks again, Adrian.
Thank you.